Alright gentlemen, this is our first how to play video, and first up on the roster we have Durin's Folk. Durin's Folk is the dwarves of the old profile book. This will not include any of the new dwarves, none of the Erebor dwarves, and none of Thorn's company. This will be simply just the dwarves that you see only in the manual, one of the 5 source books that were sold pretty much years ago. Now it seems like we might be going through an update, and I will be doing another review if anything changes by then. So, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the first thing when we talk about dwarves, we got to talk about their defense. Their defense is easily their pride and glory. Most of their army boasts about a defense 7 on average. Defense 6 is about the lowest they'll go. So essentially, you're talking about a race that won't die. This race will stick around and keep on fighting. It is easily responsible for probably about 90% of long games. This race just easily lasts against almost all blows. Even most strength 4 units, which are considered essential in order to defeat the enemy, will still need 6s in order to wound most of their basic troops. So this is definitely something that is awesome when playing the dwarves. You know you're going to hold out. Here we have the basic warriors of the dwarves of Durin's Folk. Even they have defense 7 once they get shields on them. They're not very high strength, but we'll get to that later. All their heroes of Durin's Folk also boast 7 or more. Some of them even going up as high as 9. Then even as far as speaking of defense 9, you have the Vault Warden. Vault Warden are easily one of the highest defense units in the game as far as a mainline troop. Vault Warden have a defense 9 and they are really hard to crack. If you need something to hold down, they will definitely hold it for you. I mean, their elites are defense 7. You're just talking about a race that is just amazing as far as defense is concerned. Now, speaking of being incredibly stubborn and never going down, we also have another thing for the dwarves. The dwarves have an extremely high courage value. So even once your opponent is done breaking through the defense of these guys and breaking them to 50%, they still won't go away. These guys have an average courage of 4, and they get higher easily. With a Warhorn easily accessible within their mainline troops here, they pretty much will get to courage 5. They become the courage of elves with no problem, and even on top of that, they have ways of getting it further. This guy right here, the shield bearer, he's actually capable of making all your men re-roll the courage rolls that they take. So even if you thought your men were not done, you just take one of these, which I will recommend as essential, and pretty much your whole army is never leaving you. This army just sticks around to the last man, and that is one of the great advantages of the dwarves. Now, when we talk about another great strength of the dwarves, we also have to talk about their ability to wound. Not only can they take punishment, but they can easily dish it out. All of their heroes are strength 4. All of their warriors are strength 4. I'm sorry, they're elite warriors. We're talking about the Khazid guards, the Iron guards. These guys are all strength 4, and also many of their other elites, such as even Vault Warden, the main guys meant to hold their line. These guys are strength 4. And then even on top of that, most of their heroes all get +1 to wound. When we talk about Balin, Gimli, Dane, almost all of them, Marzel, all of them get +1 to wound. I'm sorry, I may have been pronouncing Mars right. I think the name is Spear, but the guy in the spear in the back, even a spear-wielding guy gets +1 to wound to his rolls. I mean, even the King's Champion is a strength 5. This guy can beat through almost anything, and that is the main strength of the dwarves. The main strength is the main warriors hold the line, and these heroes and elites just tear through the enemy. Even the main warriors, if you have to talk about low strength, they are strength 3, which is not very good. However, they do have the option of piercing strike, since almost the entire army wields axes. We're talking about piercing strike with the main warriors, and even on top of that, you have the two-handed axe-wielding men. These guys actually are able to just beat through even further. Piercing strikes, two-handed weapon strikes, anything you need, and their defense usually can hold up even if they opt to do these moves. So, I mean, you're still talking about a race that doesn't die and can easily just cut through the enemy. Even on top of that, of all the things I just mentioned, we also have the shield bearers. These guys on the edges here, these guys with the massive shields, they're able to call heroic combats every single turn. So now we're talking about a race that really just does not quit. It just constantly butchers through. The heroic combats do have a little bit of caveat. They have to go into the fight with the enemy, with your king. But this is even more beneficial to him because the king can just call heroic strike and they can keep moving from there, chain linking heroic strikes and just pretty much cutting through almost everything. So that's easily one of the best strengths of the dwarves, along with their defense and their courage values. This race is unstoppable. All right, now when we're talking about more strengths of the dwarves, we also have to mention their fight value. Most fight value for basic troops is 3, however the dwarves have fight 4. This puts them pretty much just above any other race in the game. They are able to win fights with no problem against most armies, if not just tie them. This makes an awesome thing for the dwarves in the fact that not only is it really hard to wound them, and even when you break them, they're still not going to run, but they also are hard to win a fight against. These guys honestly are just not going down with this kind of stat line. It's awesome. You can send these guys even against some low-level heroes, just the basic troops, and they will hold up with relative ease. I mean, obviously the higher-level heroes will outfight them, but that's to be expected. And this is where your higher-level heroes have those high fight values. Even they boast like 6 fight value sometimes with your higher units. This is the best. You really need that fight 6. You need these fight 4 troops. They will hold the ground. Now, of course, if we're going to talk about all this amazing strategy of the dwarves, all these amazing stats and everything they can do, we got to talk about some weaknesses. This race is not perfect, and one of the biggest, most mentioned flaws is their lack of spear support. This has changed technically with the new dwarves, but we are only talking about the old ones here. A lot of people like to play faction only, and that's what I want to give you this advice video today. These guys have no spears. Not one. Well, actually, they do have the Vault Warden, but the problem is the Vault Warden teams, once they're disconnected, the Spear guy actually will get, or I'm sorry, the Shield will get -1 to his fight rolls. So you really don't want them separated too much. Even then, they are a hefty points to be paying for a Spear. You pay easily triple the price anyone else pays for a Spear. So these people, these dwarves, pretty much just want to fight one-on-one, and that's how you're going to have it. There's no other way around this, folks. You are going to have one-on-one fights. This is why banners are absolutely essential. You need banners. You need to be able to re-roll those fight rolls. And actually, this is why the King's Champion model is actually so great. He brings 2 banners by default as well as a beefy hero. He's honestly a must-bring in most lists just because of that fact. The ability to bring banners is going to be absolutely essential. 2 attack models are going to be essential, but otherwise, most of your dwarves, all 1 dice. Now, as far as archery for the dwarves is concerned, this actually can be a little bit of a mix in good and bad. The dwarven archery is actually pretty good shoot value for 4 up. However, the dwarves kind of suffer from a low range. Their main warriors, the dwarven archers, actually have a dwarf bow. So it's actually pretty good in the fact that it's a strength of 3, so it's going to pretty much penetrate through most things. However, it's a shorter range of 18 inches. If you want that higher range, you're paying a premium for it. The Dwarven Rangers is actually where you're going to have to go, and they get longbows, which is basically means it's a regular bow. It's still strength 2 on top of that, but you are paying a lot of points for that. Another option you have for ranged weaponry, they do have siege engines. They have the Stone Thrower. I'd say for the point value, a Stone Thrower is actually not bad. However, you're probably not going to get many of your shots off simply because dwarves are good and they favor close combat. The shots you do get off, I mean, I guess they can be scary, but since the weapon scatters, it's not too much of a point sink, but it's not going to get you very far. The last shooting unit that's pretty popular is actually the Iron Guard. These aren't really thought of as much of a shooting unit, but they do have throwing weapons, and so they can make the enemy come to you. That's really all you want to use this for. It's a utility thing. Because of the movement penalty, the shoot penalty, I mean, is their shooting value goes to a 5 up if they ever charge or even do anything with this. They're going to miss most of their shots, and it's strength 3. I mean, I know it's good for a throwing weapon. However, it's not really going to go very far. So the only thing I can say is they have a pretty good shoot in the sense that they're all heavily armored. So in a shooting war, they're going to pretty much win. Aside from Rangers, all their defense is 6 or higher. They're not getting shot down very easily. So the opponent's pretty much forced to take you on in a close combat fight. Now, as we mentioned about the dwarves, another huge weakness of them is them being slow. But even just to add on to that further, we have another problem. These guys are not only slow, but They also don't have any cav models. So if the enemy has cav models, you're pretty much just not going to keep up with them. It is really difficult. You move an average of 5 inches. The cav models move an average of 10. They're double your pace. Even if you do a heroic march, you're just not going to keep up. These guys are going to struggle to keep up with almost any fast-moving race. Once they get out of your grasp, they're pretty much getting away from you. They're going to be able to reform, remobilize. All you can do is hold tight. This is another reason why the dwarves want to stay close together. I mean, this is her only option. When an opponent has cav, that's just it. Now, here's the thing about cav, though. Even if they decide to charge against you, you still have a lot of options against them. Basically, your defense should hold up against most of their charges. However, if the opponent has lances, I would not take that charge. The opponent will only need 5s to kill most of your dwarves. Any dwarf. Because of the +1 to wound, that is your downfall. You do not want to deal with any +1 to wound type of strikes. So if you're about to take a cavalry charge, throw axes, anything, maneuver, you're going to have to. You're going to have to find a way to not take that charge, and if you do, you want to make sure you win. Shield and do anything possible. This is where your high fight value comes in. This is what you absolutely want to win a fight. Now, when we talk about strategies of the dwarves, we actually got to mention one of their most commonly used strategies. This I'm going to call the shield wall. However, when most people think of a shield wall, they often envision about 2 ranks deep. Of course, the spears can't make 2 ranks deep, but because of the dwarven defense and everything about them, they can pretty much perform this strategy just on their own. Really, what you do is you don't need to find like a cliff or anything like I'm showing here. You can actually make a circle or just make a straight line. Since the dwarves have no spears, oftentimes they're seen performing really, really long lines of men. And what you want to do is with these shield guys actually on the side here, you want to shield with them. Just shield them as much as possible. Have a banner behind them just to get that reroll. And hold the line. That's really all you want to do. You want to hold the line with them and your Vault Warden. The Vault Warden are also great at holding lines. Let's say you have this cliff up here, which is another weakness to you. Well, you can put the Vault Warden right up there. This is essentially how I'd have my Vault Warden teamed up, just right up on that cliff, just to hold the line against any opponent. Then I'd put archers on the top of the cliff and pretty much fire down. And if you don't have a cliff or anything like that, I'm just demonstrating here with the Vault Warden. Just put them on the sides. Really is all that's important. You want to guard those flanks as your main line chomps through. This is what you need to do. You need to use your shield bearers to call heroic fights. You need your Iron Guard to cut through, and you need your main heroes to cut through. That strength 5 or the +1 to wound that most heroes boast in your army, you're going to need it. You're going to really need to be able to cut through the enemy really fast. Also, keep guys in the back. As I mentioned, with absolutely no spear support, you're not going to have a back rank, which means that anytime anybody defeats any of your men, that's it for that line. You have now a hole in your line. You need to be able to fill that with back units. So despite the fact that you're not able to actually field spears, you should still have guys behind your men. And once you're able to cut through with the heroes and everything else, and with the heroic fights and all that, which you should be able to do pretty quickly, you'll have a massive gaping hole in the enemy line. They're going to be in complete disarray. It's an absolute advantage for you. You really want this. This is the basic strategy. This is the way most people will often be playing them. Another tactic that we see the dwarves use quite a lot is the hammer and anvil tactic, which probably is most appropriate with this race. The hammer and anvil is usually it's used for either a highly fast race or a really, really durable race. In this case, you are the really durable one. Essentially, the objective is to have the opponent clash against your shields. Your shields will use shielding rules plus the banner and have supports, but essentially, you're hoping that your defense will keep your opponent from actually killing you. This is the problem with your defense. Or actually the advantage of your defense is the fact that even these Morannon orcs at strength 4, units known to beat down the opponent, still need a 6 in order to break even just your basic troops. So while they're sitting there holding the ranks, a lot of times they'll place their support units in the back. This is when you actually come in with units such as Iron Guard, or actually the quite more nimble Rangers. The Rangers are actually really good with this because they move a little quicker, and the fact that they can run over difficult terrain, certain types of difficult terrain. But pretty much you use the heroic marches. You're going to need to use heroic marches because you just don't have enough speed. This is actually kind of where the weird advantage with the fact that you don't have spear support comes in.
Because you don't have spear support, your entire army is just one big line, which means usually you're able to wrap around your opponent. Yes, your speed is a problem, but if you use the heroic marches correctly, you should be able to create this type of effect where essentially your opponent is taking so long to beat through you that your surrounding army or your flankers have allowed a ton of time to reach around their backside, and effectively creating this situation. Alright guys, so that's my review of Durin's Folk. That is all my strengths and weaknesses that I think are worth mentioning, and all the strategies that I think are some of the best basic strategies to play with. Obviously there's different variants of this. You can put the Vault Warden in the middle for the shield wall, or use different types of archers, but of course these are just the basics. This is just the main way you would actually use the race. If you guys have any ways that you think that are should be worth mentioning, let me know in the comment section below, and I'm definitely going to go ahead and mention that in future videos. We have other dwarf races coming up, so I can definitely give a shout out to those who give some good ideas, give some good advice, stuff I didn't think about for this video. These videos are just about training new players, and maybe just talking about it in general and seeing what everybody thinks, getting some discussions going. So this is another video for how to play on the DCHL. Thanks for watching.